Chapter 3, Ethics and Social Responsibility, which is an interesting topic to put in the middle of marketing, you might think. Do you want to consider yourself ethical? If you don't, please don't tell us. We'll probably figure it out eventually. Do you want companies that you deal with to be ethical?
Yeah.
Anybody not care? What does it then mean to be ethical?
Follow rules.
Follow rules. Whose rules?
Right.
What we believe to be right?
Socially acceptable.
Socially acceptable?
The golden rule?
What?
The golden rule?
The golden rule? Which one's that?
Do unto others as you would have them do.
Oh, good. I like that one better than he who has the gold makes the rules. Different rule that some businesses do seem to follow. Do unto others as you have them do unto you. Does every company do unto you as a customer how you'd like them to? Maybe not. In a perfect marketplace, companies that treat us poorly, that charge too much, that make bad products would die, would fail, would be chastised, would be arrested in some form or fashion. Doesn't always work that way, particularly. Sometimes as a customer you have limited options of who you can deal with or where you get your something from, and the one option you've got maybe isn't as good a company as you wish they were. If you're talking about, say, utilities companies, for instance, you might only have one power company available to you, one internet provider available to you. So you're at the mercy of, I have to have it, I really want this service, this product, and whether or not they treat me well, whether or not I like how they do things, whether or not I like their prices, it's take it or leave it. That's not always a great situation, but sometimes is the reality of the situation. In a perfect marketplace with multiple competitors, the customer would be able to choose the one that treats them the best. The customer would be able to choose the one that believes the same way ethically or politically or something to that nature. The one that can show up on time once in the semester. The ones that care about us as a customer, perhaps. Socially responsible companies may or may not matter to you. Social control. The following factors maintain order and keep people in organizations from running amok. I like amok. What keeps us doing well as people? What keeps companies doing well? Things like ethics, what we just talked about. Doing right. Having a sense of order, justice, doing to others. Ethics. We'll talk deeper a little bit about that. How about laws? Do laws help us make decisions? Hopefully. What's some of the problems with laws?
We break them.
That's your problem with the law if you break it. Maybe. What could be problems with the laws themselves?
Sometimes they're not fair to everyone.
Fair. Justice. Back in that game. What else? Does everyone agree that what is right and what is legal always match perfectly? Do laws change over time? Yes, sometimes good, sometimes not as good. Do laws differ depending on where we're looking? We can have campus laws, per se. We can have city ordinances. We can have county ordinances. We can have state laws. We can have federal laws. We can have international jurisdiction type things. We're talking about business. We're usually talking about geographic boundaries that can change, that can move, that can go across political boundaries, other kinds of lines that may be crossed. So what is the law here may not be the law there, wherever here and there are. So if I'm following the law in one country, for instance, and I'm following the same laws in another country, sometimes yes, sometimes no. That's where we get into gray areas, where we get into questions of how do we behave, where do we follow the law versus should we follow every law? Does that help? Does that work? Is that possible? Companies have to decide that. We have formal and informal group memberships that we're a part of. You have a formal membership, say, with the university as a student, with this class, by enrolling in it. But you might have informal group memberships with friends, with a social club, especially when it doesn't require some kind of actual formal membership and fees and things like that. We have expectations of people we're with. We have sometimes the authority over different memberships within groups of what we can do with them. We have self-regulation to an extent. What do I want to do? What do I believe is right? Do I care about the law? Do I care about what others think? Where am I going to take my life, my business, things like that? How about the media? How might the media help maintain order and reduce unluckism? Can it?
Most times it's on the other side of it.
How many of you love being on the news? How many of you would love to be walking on the news or front page of the newspaper? How many of you may have ever thought, I can't do that because Mama found out? This town's too little. They'll hear about it. Before my granny died, there was the local small town paper. She was one of the informants. Meaning they'd call her and a number of other, to be honest, elderly people and say, hey, what'd y'all do this week? And everything that would happen in the family, local or not, Granny would tell the paper. So, I made the paper last week. Why? Granny said you went to visit somebody. All right, sure. You don't want the name in the paper? You don't do things. And if you don't tell Granny you traveled, you did something, you went and visited somebody, you got an award, you didn't get an award, whatever might have happened. Media at the local level, media at the grand scale of national and international news broadcasts, they do play a part. We have some conversations about where is the media helping us or hurting us different ways right now, but it's there. It keeps us informed or shows perspectives in various ways. We look at an active civil society. For the most part, we can say most of the modern developed Western Hemisphere world has a certain civilization to it that we expect a good portion of law-abiding citizenry. We expect, for the most part, to have good intentions. There are different parts of the country. There might be different parts of the town. And there's certainly different countries around the world where the civil obedience is not at play, where there is war at play in an everyday life. The willingness to bend the truth, to break laws that may be on a grand scale or much lower importance than I have to survive today. Things change, things evolve, things adapt. How we look at what happens or not. We're going to go back in time a little bit to a political moment in history. I want to preface this by saying, just because we're talking about a political moment in history does not indicate my agreement or disagreement with any particular political party. Does everyone agree that this is just me talking, not me endorsing any candidate or political party? We good? Good. There's discussions, there's policies, we can, we cannot do things. 2017, January 20. Inauguration of our current president in Washington, D.C. There was a little bit of, hiccups that day. You may or may not have cared, you may or may not have paid attention. That's something else going on, I'll turn off in a second. Inauguration happens in D.C., of course. The streets, if you've ever been to D.C., very complex city, lots of planning, lots of places where they had traffic coming through, where they had motorcades and parades coming through. This is a protest. Technically, it's going to be labeled as a sit-in. They're sitting outside or somewhere around certain barriers, certain barricades along some street somewhere. The cop is obviously very displeased with them and is getting ready to arrest them and do all kinds of wonderful things, right? No. This is a peaceful protest. We are guaranteed the right to do that. Technically, it's all about who took the picture, where the picture is from. You could possibly believe he's there protecting them from anybody that might disagree with them. because they have the right to be there, and that's fine and good, and that happened all over the city. We can have signs. We can show our agreement and disagreement with things. Generally, that's fine. That's how a lot of the day started up. Oh wait, that escalated quickly. This is just a little fire in the street, a trash can or something lit on fire. It's obviously not that big a deal because we can see all the people that are allowed to be right around it, taking pictures, video, etc., etc. But still, it's escalated a little bit. But we've got all sorts of, I don't know what order they're in at all. People in the streets, crowds, walkings, doings, all generally okay. But things got a little busy. Here's at one point, I'll warn you, this is relatively graphic stuff we get to start looking at. There's a limo. This is a stretch limo worth about 90 grand. First, its windows were busted out. The driver was threatened. The police escorted the driver away. He had some cuts and bruises and things. They spray painted some things on the side of it, and eventually they lit the whole thing on fire. Political leanings, agreements, and disagreements aside, can we see the difference between I'm sitting here because I disagree and I want to be seen disagreeing with this, and I'm now burning somebody's car? Do we see that there's a change in what we're doing here? Maybe. In this realm of the trying to get you in the mindset of the day-ish, president is a businessman. He has dealings in D.C. He would tend to ride around, I don't know, something like a limo. If we have, say, protesters from Antifa type organization, fascist, anti-fascist, whatever type organizations that look at capitalism as a bad thing, look at business as a bad thing. I'll be honest with you. Here in this building, we kind of think business is a good thing. We think capitalism is a good idea. So, different mindset, per se. We see a fancy car in front of a bank or something, I can't remember where it was parked. Mindset is, those are the other side. That's the them, and that's maybe where it got caught on fire. Owner of the limo company is Muhammad Ashfar, self-proclaimed Muslim, Pakistani immigrant, risen to the ranks of CEO of this limousine company. They got about 30 black cars around D.C. for the most part. If you're picking your target of who you disagree with, he's not a Trump supporter. Attacking his business, his property, doesn't make sense on the narrative. Yeah. When we see things like this happen, the first picture showed police calmly allowing, nonviolent protests to take place without any troubles, without any worries. As the day went on and things got rougher, that mentality changed. Probably rightly, but it's still kind of scary. The play. Okay, stupid marketers. Gotta watch an ad before I see the stuff I want to see. This is called an interstitial. It's an ad that's put in front of or in the middle of something else you care about. The reason you're here, and as long as we know you're here, we want to hear from you too.
What's really provoking the riot police are trying to maintain some order are the rocks you see being thrown. Some protesters continuing, and again, this is largely the Disrupt J20, the folks that wanted a not smooth inauguration. You see now pepper spray, pretty intense. Stay behind me, Kathy, careful. Careful. Yeah, they are. What they're doing, Brett, is they're kind of, excuse her, what they're trying to do is box us in a little bit, or the protesters, that is. We seem to have caught ourselves in the middle trying to show you guys, but they're coming from this angle as well as from behind us, and I think they're trying to kind of close down on the core protesters. And, I can't say this enough, but, hold on. Look out, look out, look out. They're coming. No, we're going to step out of the way. We're going to step out of the way. Step out of the way. Step out of their way. Step out of their way. Step out of here. Okay. Media. Back. Brad, I'm not sure you're still with us. We are okay. You know, part of what that was, which looked dramatic, but we got ourselves caught. They're trying to rapidly just take this 3 or 4 block radius around, and when the police move, we have to get out of the way. We're trying to stay out of their way, but we want you to see this line here. You see they're using pepper spray, they're using their force, they're going to try and close on the protesters, and we're going to try and get out of their way as best as we can. But the point I was making before that happened was that this is really...
I think that's really pepper spray, concussive grenades, they're meant to scare you. They're not meant to be physically damaging. This took place after things like limo catches on fire, after protesters have now sent 2 police officers to the hospital with injuries. As the civil obedience level breaks apart, the ability to control the civility of the civilians is ramped up by force. In the end of it, protesters that were not being peaceful were arrested and removed from the situation, especially some, we find out later, are paid to disrupt the thing by certain political activists in different ways. They're meant to come in and cause chaos to make the news. Nothing else. There's modes of social control. We see evidence of that in certain rioting behaviors, even within our own soil, much less more war-torn countries or political unrest type places around the world, where we don't know what's going to happen, where we have to pay attention. The media is showing us things. Different media from different perspectives can show us different angles of the same story, and we get different looks at that. An active civil society doesn't usually require pepper spray and concussive grenades. Moving on. Because we're here to talk about business, not politics. How we make decisions in our personal life can also, of course, move into how we make decisions in our professional life. If we want to be, choose to be, actively try to be ethical, moral, upright citizens in our personal life, then in theory that should also move over into our professional life, in our businesses, in our management positions, in our employee behavior, in our dealings with customers. That should connect together. Ethics and morals, kind of words that we use to define each other and how we understand it. These are those things that you probably have an understanding of what it means, but it's hard to define what we mean. And in every situation, how we look at it can change drastically. Ethics, the moral principles or values that generally govern the conduct of an individual. Looking, for the most part, at ethics within the individual person. What do I believe? What do I think is right? What do I think is okay? Personally, professionally, politically, whatever it might be. Morals, the rules people develop as a result of cultural values and norms. We look at morals just the slightest bit different in how are we raised, for instance. The culture that we're part of, our family, what do they believe? Our ethics are, for the most part, our own, but they are absolutely governed or influenced by those around us. Ethics. As a small child, the ethics, the behaviors, the morals, the behaviors that are seen as good and seen as bad, seen as okay, seen as not okay, of our parents, of our family around us, of those that raise us and influence us, are absolutely going to affect the person we are. Especially up to a point where you can take responsibility for your own life. Just because you were raised in a certain way, say in a bad situation, that doesn't mean you have to continue it. When you get to a certain age, obviously legally, you are treated as your own person. And what you choose to continue doing is then up to you. In the same vein, if you're raised in an upright, healthy, good atmosphere, that doesn't guarantee you a free pass in the rest of life either. It's still, what did you choose to do? What are your decisions? Morals among the good and the bad, as well as what we see as deviant behaviors. And when we see that, it's in different places, different times, different settings. all those can change. How many of you all we have a website? Okay, good. We know we have a bulletin. There's an undergraduate bulletin, and there's technically a graduate bulletin. You might need that later. How many of y'all have ever looked in the undergraduate bulletin? I don't even know if you can still get a paper copy anymore. They used to have them in a thick book, but we went, nobody reads this thing. Let's just keep it all online. Welcome to the online undergraduate bulletin. It's a number of features to assist you, including search options, navigation, portfolio. Helps us look at things about the university, student policies, admissions, tuition, expenses, financial aid, student affairs, services, academic policies, resources, the colleges and departments, degree requirements, programs, courses, administration, and faculty, schedule of classes, all wonderful stuff here. One of those things that you should have read, you may not have read, is things within our student policies, such as our honor code. 2.1, student honor code. This University for Women is known for high academic standards, ideals, and traditions. Each student who enrolls as a student at MUW is expected to uphold to this code. I pledge myself to uphold the highest standards of honesty in all phases of university life, both alone and with many, and accept my responsibility for helping others to live up to such standards. All this I will do that my university may become greater, better, and more beautiful than when I entered it. You've got rights, you've got responsibilities. If you have complaints, this all spells out how you deal with that. These are guiding type principles, ways that we look to an organization of which we are a member and how it expects us to behave, how we are told to behave, how we can be affected if we choose to have deviant behavior from the expectations of ourselves. We look at ethics, how we develop on that personal level is not strictly about age. You know people that matured faster than others. We're going to talk about that from a physical standpoint, but that's biology class. I don't want to deal with that. But we talk about that from a spiritual standpoint, for instance, within religions. We can look at that from a decision-making context. We hear all the time, you hope not, but we hear all the time, if you pay attention to the news, about are we going to charge that person as a minor or not, depending on their age and depending on the severity of the crime and what level of understanding and maturity they may have been doing. A 16-year-old may be charged as a minor in this crime. It could show that they had the capacity, they understood what they were doing. We're actually going to charge them as an adult. 17, even grayer, 18, just about everywhere, for just about everything you're going to be charged as an adult. But it's some of that changing times. Ethical development levels, psychologically, we look at where do people understand what they're doing. How do we understand what is right, what is wrong, and how does that affect us? How does that affect my decision making in a personal way, in a professional way, wherever we might be thinking? Three kind of psychological tenets of developmental levels in ethics. We've got pre-conventional morality, conventional morality, post-conventional morality is what they've been labeled. For the most part, again, it's not strictly by age. You can't say from this age to this age you should be here. We have some ideas that at the childlike age, as we start out, if we're in a healthy environment that teaches right and wrong, that gives us guidance, gives us structure, we expect children to be at a pre-conventional stage, and we expect and hope they will advance from that. Though lots of factors can affect how that happens. Pre-conventional morality, based on what's going to be punished and rewarded. It's very self-centered, calculating, it's selfish, it's what's good for me and me alone, for the most part. I got 6 children, y'all. Yeah. 4 weeks. From 11 to 2.5. Pretty condensed. Do I expect the same behaviors from the 2.5-year-old as I do the 11-year-old? No. And vice versa. I got 3 girls at 6 weeks and 7 and 9. They do a wonderful helping around the house, have some great ideas and behaviors, and sometimes swing more towards that 11-year-olds. Sometimes they swing more towards the toddlers. One of the things that has to be repeated more often than not is quit arguing with the toddlers. 2.5 and a 3-year-old. They, 2.5 and a 3-year-old, care a lot about me. What do I want? I want the cookie. I want to do this. I do not want to do this. I do not want to take a nap. What's in it for me? As the rest of the children, of course, have aged and matured, hopefully past that, but they're thinking of others, thinking of something besides strictly what's the best for me, myself, and I. They have to then struggle with somebody that they don't understand. No, you can't steal it. No, that's my cup. That's my toy. That's my thing. And we have to tell them they don't understand yet. They want what's best for them. They want the cookie. They want your toy. They want to do whatever they want to do. We're trying to teach them. We're trying to mold them. We're trying to advance them. But they're at a pre-conventional morality stage. As children mature in a loving, healthy, structured environment that not everybody gets, sadly, we have to help and understand, and not everybody even leaves this. We have adults that do not have any other kind of, say, intelligence issues, any kind of disabilities from a learning standpoint or things like that. They should be normal thinking, normal behaving, functioning adults. But because of where they were raised, how they were raised, the lack of structure they may have had, sometimes by their own choices, we see still a lot of self-centeredness, a lot of selfishness, a lot of what's good for me, what can I get away with? And that's why we have cops on the street having to arrest burglars and thieves every day. That they're by choice and sometimes not by choice-ish, by circumstances. What's good for me is more important than what's okay for you. As we hopefully mature and see it's not just people but societies advance to more conventional morality, we move towards expectations of the larger group. What does the group say is a good thing or not? What is expected of me as a part of this group? We're concerned about legality more so. Not just what am I going to be punished or not, but what's stated as okay. What is stated as legal and upright. The rules of the game. As we hopefully move towards a post-conventional morality and a more mature kind of understanding, we concern not only about ourselves and what's best for us, how are we going to get away with stuff. We move past what do people expect of me, what do the laws say I'm allowed to do or not, and we hopefully actually start looking back in ourselves, but not in a selfish way, but in a guiding way. What do I believe? What is okay? The law says I'm allowed to do that, but I don't want to do that. I don't believe that's okay. Just because the law says it's okay, I don't believe it. The law says I can't do that, but I don't believe the law's right, and I think the good thing, the right thing, the just thing is outside of the law. Sometimes society can agree with that, and sometimes society does not agree with that. We start looking at the long-term prospects. 2.5-year-old doesn't care about what happens tomorrow. She wants the cookie today. But as we mature, we start looking in a longer lens type way. How we develop personally, of course, also affects what we do professionally. If I got mature, highly moral employees, my company then has a strong understanding of what's expected, how we're going to lead, what we're going to do as we move forward. How we make ethical decisions can be influenced by all sorts of things. Good things, bad things, helpful things, unhappy things, whatever. When we decide whether or not to do something, our level of morality, of course, comes into play. And especially the less mature we are in something, we start to think about consequences more so than, is this the right thing to do, perhaps? Look at the extent of the problem. If I choose to do this, how big a deal is it? I'm going to guess, I'm not going to ask, but I'm going to guess most of us would agree, robbing the bank, bad thing. Yeah? Okay. I'm going to hope, I'm not asking, most of you would agree, stealing somebody's laptop they left while they went to the restroom, bad thing. What about, I need a piece of paper, and you left, but, I mean, you got no book with paper, and I'm just going to take it because I need it for this quiz. Wasn't mine. Didn't ask. Big deal? Extent of the problem has an impact on how we make decisions. Whether or not it's a big deal or not can impact how we make decisions. The probability of harm. Rob the bank, probably a lot of harm. Set fire to a limo, fair amount of harm. Take a piece of paper out of a notebook, old paper. Are they going to notice? Probably not. Are they going to care? Probably not. Is it going to impact the rest of their life? Probably not. Probability of harm changes whether or not we do something. If we're paying attention, say within a business context, we look to our leaders, our direct bosses, and especially the higher up in the company we can watch. If we see upright, ethical behavior from the CEO, we are more likely as employees to also make upright, ethical decisions. If we see shady deals from our bosses, if they say, no, don't write that down. We took in this money, but we're not reporting this to the accountants. If we see some of that, hopefully you have a way to get out of that situation. But if we see some of that, we're more likely to go, I guess it's okay. I see some. The boss took a few extra dollars home. I guess it's okay. I'll take a couple extra dollars home. Not good, not right, not legal usually, but we pay attention to those above us. They're models for us. We pay attention to the time until consequences. If something's going to go wrong, how long will it take? Am I going to be in trouble tomorrow? Or if somebody finds out, I got 30, 40 years before it matters. That's going to impact how we make decisions. We're a car company. We're thinking about how much money should we spend on R&D for, I don't know, the brakes for the new vehicle. We're going to make decisions about quality, what we make the components out of, what kind of labor costs we're putting into them, how much testing we're going to do, how many rivets or screws or bolts are going to be in part of this system. Should we use stainless? Should we use aluminum? Should we use titanium? There's going to have cost factors. It's a luxury car, so we have more money to put into it. This is trying to be the budget basement car, so we're trying to keep costs low. I mean, if the brakes go wrong, I don't think of it, but if the brakes would go wrong, there's probably going to be 15, 20 years before there's ever a problem. The consequences have been stretched out. Okay? If the brakes go wrong, it'll just be like soft braking. They can still stop. It's just going to not feel perfectly right. They're going to have they probably have 3-4 weeks. If they get it to the mechanic, everything will be fine. That's a different issue than if the brakes fail, they have no ability to stop, and they're most likely to fail at, interstate speeds. How the decision affects people can change. The extent of it, the time rates, the probability of harm, the potential consequences. My brakes go out on the interstate. There's a whole lot of consequences that could come out to that, more so than 10 people that are number. How many people are going to be affected? One person? Okay, what do I think? Do I like this person or not? What do I care? 1,000 people are going to be affected by my decision. Do I have a reason to not like this whole group of people? Maybe the common denominator is me if I don't like 1,000 people. Social consensus. What does everybody else believe? What are people going to think about this? What do I stand to gain versus lose? If I'm on the front page of the paper, how many people are going to see it? What are they going to think of me? We can have extreme situations. We can have completely minor situations. A lot of your decision making as you grow, as you mature, as you get into careers, depending on where you work and such, there can be some gray area decision making that has consequences. Small consequences, large consequences, arrestable consequences, capital murder charges consequences. People just want to like me consequences. They're going to affect your decision making. I'm hoping you're able to steer towards the right, ethical, just, legal path always. Are we looking at ethical guidelines like we looked at the student code of conduct? The code of ethics, code of conduct, rules of behavior, how we do things here, can be named all sorts of things by different businesses and organizations, countries. We identify acceptable practices, especially we're talking about within business. What are we allowed to do and not allowed to do? We control behavior internally. It's a lot cheaper, quicker, easier, hopefully more effective if the boss, the HR department, the leadership within the company says, we're allowed to do this and not allowed to do that. If you do this, you're going to do well, you'll advance. If you don't do this, if you don't follow our guidelines, if you try and do things wrong, you're fired, or worse. If somebody outside the company has to get involved, things get worse. If ethical regulators from the government have to get involved, if the law enforcement has to get involved, the company can't control things if the company has not set up things properly, if the company's at fault. No matter what, if somebody comes in from the outside, everything gets worse. So of course we like to control things within. That's not the same as covering up what we're doing inside. We do not need to have things that we need to cover up. If you have to sneak around to do it, if you have to lie to convince people it didn't happen, if you have to cover up the evidence, why are we doing this? Not good choices. We avoid confusion in decision making as much as possible within whatever we do generally on a day as part of our business, part of our organization. This is how we do it, not like this. We pay this way, not like that. We keep a paper trail, we don't pay cash under the table. All kinds of ways that we make decisions, hopefully with less confusion. We will talk about discussion. Employees should feel okay with asking, why are we doing it this way? How can we do it this way? Is it legal to do it this way? Should I be worried about doing something this way? We've got whistleblower laws in place. We've got complaints. You saw down at the bottom of the screen on our W website, you've got complaining behaviors. And also, as a student, there's 800 numbers that are completely anonymous if you have an issue. Employees have issues with their leadership, all kinds of good, useful, purposeful points. But back to that, laws are different in different places. What's legal and normal and not deviant behavior, say in the U.S., may or may not be the same around the world. Different countries are going to have different laws, different standards, different cultural norms, different ways of doing things. Sometimes at least as good as our laws and behaviors, every once in a while better, and sometimes not nearly to the same standard that we appreciate here. A legal issue, the U.S. federal level, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, FCPA, relatively important thing that honestly for a lot of history has not been well enforced per se, but within the last decade-ish, it's gotten more important, especially as say the internet has grown. We have so much more of a global marketplace that we're having to pay more attention to how we do business around the world. The media has made it a more 24/7 kind of world in more recent history, so we see more of what's going on around the globe too. FCPA prohibits U.S. corporations from making illegal payments to foreign officials or other accounting transparency issues. For instance, I might have a company that started in the U.S., headquartered in the U.S., but I'm building a factory in some other country. The way we do things here, as far as getting permits, as far as hiring contractors, as far as taking governmental bids, things like that, may be different in another country. There may be legal and illegal, but cultural expectations within that country that before I'm going to rubber stamp that this permit is accepted, that you can break ground, that the electricity is okay, I need to find something right here to make my hand work over here. That may be the cultural expectation of the country or the culture. That's a hard area. If there's specifically laws against bribery of government officials in that country, that's pretty cut and dry. Not every country has spelled that out, usually because the politicians that would set the laws are the ones that want the thing to show up right here. FCPA then has to deal with our countries or our companies behaving correctly, and that's why it's a hard decision, hard thing to understand, hard thing to prove sometimes, because of course a lot of it's cash based. We're not writing checks and writing on the memo line bribe. That okay, some criminals are that stupid, but for the most part, it's unmarked transfers to South American shell companies. It's cash in a briefcase kind of issues sometimes. There's been criticism that this law is a bad thing because if a U.S. company is trying to compete against locals or companies from other countries that don't have these same standards, we can't get the contract. We can't get the real estate. We can't make things happen because we, as a company in the U.S., has to deal with FCPA and somebody else doesn't. So they can do stuff quicker or cheaper or get things done that we can't. And that has been a criticism. And that's where ethics, morals, and legalities get gravified. What do I believe is right? What do I believe is just? Versus what does the law say should happen? It's gone different ways at different times. But the fact that the U.S., of course, is a global leader in world economy, and not just the U.S., but a lot of, let's be honest, Western Europe-based countries, Germany's and Italy's and UK's and things like that, all have similar type expectations. We're talking about the less developed world for the most part when we see things. Loads of people in India and China and most of the continent of Africa that have a lot of developing buying power, but not necessarily the same developed law systems, civil societies in every place, things like that have come into play. Like I said, FCPA has been a little more rigorous coming forward. You may know Alcoa as a company, multi-billion-dollar company, deals with things like aluminum ore and mining and refining. For instance, that's one of their big company things around the world.
It's a nice playbook for the court. They are agreeing just now to pay $384 million to settle charges with the SEC and the DOJ related to charges of bribing foreign government officials. Alcoa and its subsidiaries have been charged with violating the FCPA, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, something, David, we keep seeing very big companies run into that do business around the world.
The most notable of which, of course, continues to be Walmart in Mexico. We'll see, though, that is...
I don't know about Alcoa's revenues and market cap are all. I didn't look that up. But let's say they're a $10 billion company. $384 million, still a good chunk of my company, revenue I made last year, for instance. A lot of the point of how FCPA comes into play, if for instance, I bribed government officials in a number of countries around the world in the last decade, and I spent $25 million on bribes. They aren't coming in and just saying you gotta pay a fine of $25 million. Yes, and it's kind of like punitive damages in a lawsuit. We're trying to make it hurt so that you, of course, don't do it again, but others look around and go, I don't know if this is worth it. Back to the consequences. Back to how long is it going to take? How big's the impact going to be? I'm going to get a contract worth $100 million if I bribe you. But I just watched FCPA charge Alcoa with $384 million in fines. The risk-reward scenario is what they're trying to impact, honestly. Back in 2011, Walmart, things happened where Walmart reported themselves, eventually, that dealing with some bribery charges in Mexico primarily, but then expanding to other places like China, dealing with bribery and trying to get new stores open, new distribution networks online, things like that. 2011 is when it really, really started.
Walmart is said to be deadlocked with the U.S. government over a years-long bribery probe. The investigation seemed to near its end last fall after the company set aside nearly $300 million for a possible resolution. It's not about the money. Bloomberg sources say prosecutors are insisting the world's largest retailer admit to misconduct as part of any deal, a compromise the company is hesitant to fulfill. The investigation is one of the biggest foreign corruption probes of a U.S. company in history. For 6 years, authorities have been looking into whether Walmart bribed government officials in countries like Mexico, India, and China to speed up store openings.
It's kind of interesting. Walmart's basically said, we'll pay the fine. let's be honest, Walmart's got the cash sitting aside. They literally already put aside about $300 million ready to pay the fine. Walmart's the largest retailer in the world. They're probably the best known retailer in the world. Basically, the federal government is trying to get something more out of it. They know they can afford it. They know $300 million isn't even going to hurt at Walmart's level. There's a line where we'll pay the fine, but we don't admit that we did anything wrong. And the feds are trying to go with, yeah, you're paying the fine, but we also want, just say you did it and let's move on. There's a liability issue. There's a legalities issue lying there. I can settle out of court and keep it out of the papers, but I never admit that I did anything wrong. Or we can, go to trial, we can have an issue here, and then it's all over the newspaper. And if I'm found guilty of something, it's a much bigger story that can hurt. And at a certain level, the SCPA can absolutely arrest executives, send them to prison for corruption and things like that. So when a company like Walmart admits we did corruption, then somebody then has to take the fall. They have to have somebody to prosecute. It's some big time issues. Moving a little bit away from, let's be honest, some heavy stuff. From protests to foreign corruption such as that. Let's take a moment. Just some corporate social responsibility. CSR. Looking at our concern for society around us. From a business standpoint, for instance. How do I make my products or transport my products or do whatever it is I do to make money as a business? And am I positively impacting those involved? For instance, if I'm a clothing manufacturer, the cheapest, say, clothes I can get made is in some little village in China where I have a sweatshop where teenagers work for $17 or $18 hours a day at a very low wage. But the shirts we produce are cheap, and Americans like cheap. Back to Walmart, honestly. There's a reason they got shelves full all over the countryside at real low prices. They're not always the best produced merchandise. That's changed over the years. We're getting more concerned for welfare of people, of animals, of natural resources. We kind of have camps that care about corporate social responsibility and camps that do not. If we think it's a good idea, it's because it's the right thing to do. We pay a good wage. We don't have sweatshop conditions. We don't test cosmetics on animals. We don't slash and burn the rainforest for lumber. Things like that. We think it's the right thing to do. That businesses have the resources to devote to fixing problems. If Walmart has $300 million to set aside to say we bribed folks, don't they also have some money set aside that they can make better choices, that they can absorb more costs for better produced products, things like that? If we deal with our company on the inside again, if we make good choices of our own volition, it prevents government regulation from coming in. One of the things that's been interesting to watch over the decades with, say, energy companies, if we use coal power, relatively important to the South, honestly. If we have coal-fired factories to produce our whatever, if we choose to invest in technology, to look for new innovations in order to clean the pollution, to better mine with less impact on the environment, if we as a company, an industry, a trade group, choose to do good things ourselves, the government then doesn't have to step in and make us. That's been a kind of give and take over the year. Different administrations, different political parties care more and less to that effect. Put more regulations on, pull regulations off, things like that. There's a possibility over time, it kind of changes, depends on demographics, depends on what we're talking about, but more socially responsible companies may make us more money. That can obviously be a good thing. In capitalism, we'd like to make more money. People that generally are against a lot of the idea of CSR, for instance, the stockholders in the company. If I'm investing time and money and effort into doing CSR projects, into building new technologies that we aren't legally required to do, that's money that the company's pouring back into things that are not coming into my stock price, that are not being paid out to me as a dividend, that have an impact. Business executives spend shareholder money on environmental initiatives or whatever it is we're trying to be more socially conscious about something. Here's an ad from quite a few years ago now, actually.
In the chilly hours and minutes of uncertainty, I want to be in the warm heart of your love and mine, to feel you all around me and to take your hand along the sand. But I may as well try and catch the wind.
Capturing the wind and putting it to good use. Wind energy from GE.
What's GE advertising here?
Wind energy?
Did they tell me where I can go buy some wind energy? Is there a product they're trying to sell me as a customer? No, it's back to think better about my brand. Think that we are making purposeful, positive steps towards more environmentally conscious energy production. GE is one of the largest corporations in the world. They do all kinds of things, stuff that we see as a consumer, and they generally try to make it real clean, real happy, real pleasant. Some stuff on, say, government contracting level, military productions, just nuts and bolts, greasy type industries, where they get a lot of flack from, say, environmental groups. They're trying to polish up the image from this perspective. Wind energy is one of those people can like it, cannot like it. It's renewable, but what it does to the land that's around it, how much energy it takes to produce the turbines on a giant wind farm like that, the impacts to the local wildlife. There's a lot of birds that hit those fans, honestly. There's for and against, just like everything else that we look at. But they're going with, it's clean, it's happy, we're good, yeah, we all like it. No, you can't read this. That's in the slides. Kind of the levels of CSR. If a company wants to start going in this direction, leadership from their own ethical standpoint or from outside pressures to look better, happens both ways, we kind of sometimes start out in stages and we grow from there. The base level, our foundation, is usually some kind of economic issues. It's the idea that we have to be profitable. As a company, if we can't make profit, we can't exist long term. If we always have a debt, eventually the company has to give up. Or it's going to get bought out, it's going to get shut down, something's going to go wrong. So our first responsibility is, as a company, we have to make money. Which means we got to sell products, we have to build things, provide services, whatever it is that customers like, that customers will buy, that we can build a profit out of. Because a company that fails cannot serve its customers. A company that fails has no money to give back to the environment or to some local community organizations, things like that. So we got to first have the money to do anything else. Interestingly, the next level is legalities. After we've been profitable, we should also be making profit legally. Drug dealers can make a lot of money, y'all. They can deal with this first one pretty well. You might have some drug dealers on your corners that care a lot about local education. They give back to the community center or something. It's weird, but it could happen. But CSR has to build that we also have to pay attention. We have to not just make money, we have to make money the right way. And again, FCPA deals with making money the right way around the world. It might be different. Then we get up to some kind of ethical things. Our responsibility is to be ethical, be right, be just, be fair. We're not just making money. We're not just following the letter of the law that lawyers have poured over and told us you can do this, you can't do that, here's a loophole over here. But now we're actually trying to do the best we can do on purpose. The last level of CSR, and the one that honestly gets a little bit more flack, that for and against kind of decision, is from a philanthropic level. That's one of those words I only say once because I can't probably say it again. Being a good corporate citizen, we look for ways to community fundraise, to give grants, to build up, to have volunteer hours. Pay attention to the stores you walk in more, and you'll see the boards talking about how much money we gave to the local school board, the library, how many hours did our employees volunteer last year, all kinds of things in that respect. Yeah, I'm gonna do a little quick thing. That one down from the page. Up, down. You ready to play? QR code, you got A, B, C, or D. Whichever letter you pick, make sure it's the one that's up. Hold it to the side so you're not covering over part of the code. Yeah? Question. Your behavior, your opinion, recycling is a good thing for the environment. A is highly agree, B you somewhat agree, C you somewhat disagree, D you highly disagree. Whichever letter you pick, it's the one that goes up, and make sure you hold it from the side so it doesn't cover up anything. Recycling is a good thing for the environment. I think that's everybody. Click up here to show things. I can do it here. Highly agree wins out. Somewhat agree. One of you highly disagrees. That's fine. That's why it's an opinion. That's why it's anonymous. You point to this sometimes. You raise your hand. You maybe aren't willing to raise your hand. Maybe you just messed up and you meant A or C, or you probably did. It's fine. Alright. Next one. I pay attention if products say that they include recycled content or recyclable content. Always, sometimes, rarely, or never. Again, it's anonymous. Can't see what your letter is. Nobody around you, unless you show it to them, can see what your letter says. No, I'm not recording you in any fashion. I can't see your faces in this. Interesting. Some of you care sometimes. The majority of you do not. I personally recycle. As much as possible, sometimes, rarely, or never. You personally, what do you do? Majority, again, on the negative side of things. So we got to see sometimes, as much as possible. Okay. Last question. I would be willing to pay more for a product that includes recycled or recyclable content. I have an idea where this is going to go based on the previous question. Definitely, maybe, probably not, definitely not. Willing to pay more for recycled or recyclable content. Any surprises here? Not really. Maybe. Did I say how much more? Did I say what we're talking about? Absolutely not. Let me get you to think more ambiguously, honestly. Fair bit of consistency here, thank you. For the most part, that seemed to have gone not how I expected. I didn't come in with expectations, but you answered consistently. If no one cared about recyclable content at the beginning, I wouldn't expect you to be willing to pay more, would I? Why is this potentially a marketing issue then? Good, what else? Is it a marketing issue? What did we just watch GE try and tell us about? Wind energy, environmental things. How about this one?
A brilliant idea starts at the source. innovative design, we're taking steps to create a better future. Now, the Pure Fresh taste of design comes in a redesigned bottle, up to 30% made from plants, and as always, it's 100% recyclable. Plant bottle, designed to make a difference.
For health reasons?
No. Or recyclable and recycled content. Instead of using petroleum-based plastic exclusively, we're using some kind of plant-based something to make a bottle now.
That means it'll break down
Still
quicker.
plastic, though.
Said up at that point, up to 30% plant content. The rest of it is still good old-fashioned plastic. Need a sign in the room. Coca-Cola. Yeah. You see the little plant bottle thing on there? Is it still on there? Is that why you picked that brand?
No, I just like this on the judge.
Who's Dasani owned by? Give you a hint. Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola is looking at his levels. Coca-Cola's got the profitability side down. They're following the law for the most part all around the world. Ethical, depends on what we're talking about. They're trying to do something bigger than that. They're trying to look at hoping that consumers might care. You consumers obviously do not. There's research touched on it every once in a while. The concern for, say, recyclable content, recycled content has grown. The concern for corporate social responsibility has grown in the last couple decades. Millennials' willingness to pay more for products, like that last question, has grown. Whereas a research study is always relatively limited. If we're talking to a few, 20, 30,000 people, that's a good many people's opinion, but we're going to then put them out to 300 million in the U.S. or 7 or 8 billion in the world. So we always have to take studies with a grain of salt. Some recent studies have said globally about 65%, about 2/3 of who they asked said it was important to have corporate social responsibility, to care about renewable energies, to care about recyclable content, things like that. But when they broke it down by millennials, which they labeled as born from roughly 75 to 95, 1975 to 1995 millennials, the number raised to about 3 out of 4, around 75%, cared more, and especially to that last question, are willing to pay extra to things. It all falls under what we call green marketing. Development and marketing of products designed to minimize negative effects on the environment or somehow improve the environment. Because petroleum, burning fossil fuels, strip mining, labor around the world, things like that. Environmentally aware customers may be willing to pay more. Problem is, how many of them are there and how much more? If I'm asking you to pay an extra 8 cents for a $20 product, you might be willing to do that if you care and if you pay attention at all. If I'm asking you to pay an extra $8 on a $20 product, the willingness to care suddenly goes down real quick. So it's the impact of how much do our ethics, for instance, do our beliefs, do what we care about, do what we think is important or not matter, especially when we're talking about dollars. Cause-related marketing. For-profit, non-profit organizations working together to run a fundraiser, to bring awareness to a certain cause. We get about $7 billion within the marketing industry out of this. When we have, say, for-profit companies, Walmart, for instance, giving money to charities, but especially for bringing in like non-profits and trying to give them a voice, trying to put them out in the world. But if we do it too often, if a non-profit asks its donors, its supporters too many times, we stop caring. We can only care so much. This is a Super Bowl ad back in 2015, I think. This is especially in response to some recent allegations to certain football players about domestic abuse and things. heavy Super Bowl ads that year. NoMore.org, nonprofit, they can't afford a Super Bowl ad. They can't afford to spend $5 million. The NFL actually paid the tab to get the message out relatively effectively. Back to last little thing, another ad from 2017. How we fatigue our supporters sometimes.
Hey, Melissa, the whales need your help.
I love whales! Go, Melissa!
Hey, Melissa, now the trees need you. The ice cats are in trouble. Now the rhinos need saving.
It's hard to be an eco-warrior, but it's easy to drive like one. Introducing the most fuel-efficient crossover, the Kia Niro.
How we impact our supporters, customers, whoever cares about us. Don't overdo it. That's the end of that.